To the world, Diana was the wounded princess in a broken marriage. But inside that note, she was something far more dangerous to the palace a witness. She had seen the hidden loyalties, the whispered meetings, and the emotional betrayal no crown could cover. Before we go deeper into this royal secret, subscribe to the channel for more dramatic stories about power, love, betrayal, and the hidden side of the monarchy. Diana's note was not written like a jealous confession. It did not feel like the words of a woman simply angry over a broken heart. It felt heavier than that. It felt like a record, a warning, a final attempt to place the truth somewhere safe before others had the chance to twist it. Every line carried pain, but beneath that pain was something sharper. Diana was trying to explain what she believed was happening around her, and why it was slowly destroying the life the world had been told was perfect. For years, the palace had sold the image of a beautiful royal marriage. A prince, a princess, 2 sons, and a future wrapped in ceremony. But Diana had lived inside that picture, and she knew where the cracks were. She had felt the distance in Charles. She had noticed the silence that came after certain names were spoken. And above all, she had come to believe that Camilla was not simply a woman from Charles's past. In Diana's mind, Camilla was still present, not always in the room, but in the marriage. Not always visible, but always felt. That was what made the note so dangerous. Diana was not just accusing a rival. She was describing an emotional shadow that followed her through royal life. She was surrounded by servants, advisors, rules, cameras, and endless duties, yet somehow she felt completely alone. The palace could dress loneliness in jewels. It could hide tears behind smiles. But it could not remove the feeling that Diana had been placed inside a life where everyone knew more than they said. And then there were her children. Diana's pain was not only about herself. It reached toward William and Harry. If Camilla's influence had wounded her marriage, then Diana feared it could also shape the boys' future. She worried about what they would be told, what they would be allowed to remember, and whether one day her suffering would be made to look like weakness while others walked away protected. That was the part the Queen could not ignore. If Diana's claims were taken seriously, the palace would have to admit something devastating. The fairy tale marriage had not simply failed. It had been damaged from within. And if the public ever believed that, then Charles would not be the only one questioned. The crown itself would be forced to answer. So Diana's note became more than paper. It became proof of a wound the monarchy could not heal in public. And the Queen, the one person powerful enough to understand its full danger, knew at once that this was not just about love. It was about loyalty, legacy, and the moral image of the throne. And once the Queen understood what Diana was truly warning her about, the secret note stopped being a private letter and became a royal crisis. The Queen had survived scandals before. She had seen family betrayals, public humiliation, and private grief. But this was different. Diana's note did not attack the monarchy from the outside. It came from inside the royal household, from the woman the nation already loved. That was what made the moment so dangerous. The Queen was not reading a rumor from the press or a claim from someone trying to damage the crown. She was reading Diana's own words. Every sentence carried weight. Every line seemed to open another door the palace had tried to keep shut. This was not noise from the outside world. This was pain from inside the family. Written by a woman who had once been welcomed as the future of the monarchy. And in that silence, the Queen understood the danger. Diana's words were emotional, but they were also political. They touched Charles. They touched Camilla. They touched William and Harry. They touched the image of the royal family itself. If the note was ever seen by the public, it would not feel like a private complaint. It would feel like evidence. It would make people ask who had known, who had stayed quiet, And who had allowed Diana to feel so alone? That was the burden the queen carried in that private moment. As sovereign, she had to protect the crown. As a mother, she had to think of Charles, the son who would one day wear the crown after her. As a grandmother, she had to think of William and Harry, two boys already carrying the pain of their mother's suffering. And as a woman who understood duty better than almost anyone alive, she also had to face Diana's memory. Because Diana was no longer just a troubled princess in the headlines. She was becoming a symbol of everything the palace had failed to understand. The queen knew Diana's pain had already reached the world. People had seen the sadness behind the smiles. They had heard the cracks in the fairy tale. But the note made it impossible to dismiss that pain in private. It gave it shape. It gave it words. It made Camilla's place in the royal story impossible to treat as only Charles's personal matter. From that moment, Camilla's future was tied to something much larger than love. It was tied to trust, reputation, and the fragile bond between the monarchy and the people. That was why the queen did not rush. She did not explode. She did not call the family together in open anger. Her shock was quiet, but it was deep. Those closest to the palace may have sensed that something had shifted. A different kind of caution entered the air. Certain names became heavier. Certain choices became slower. The full contents of the note may have stayed hidden, but its shadow began to move through the family. And perhaps that was the most chilling part. The queen chose silence not because she felt nothing, but because she felt the consequences too deeply. She understood that one wrong word could split loyalty forever. One careless move could turn Diana's private warning into a public war. But silence inside the palace was never empty, it was strategy. And the queen's next move would determine who would be protected and who would be sacrificed. There are names a palace can absorb and names it cannot survive. In Diana's secret note, Camilla's name carried more than scandal. It carried accusation, memory, and consequence. For the queen, that name became a locked door no one dared open too loudly. Because once Camilla's name appeared inside Diana's warning, everything changed. It was no longer only a whisper in drawing rooms, or a story passed between reporters and royal watchers. It became part of Diana's own record of pain. And that made it dangerous in a way no headline could ever be. Diana was not simply pointing toward another woman. She was pointing toward what she believed Camilla represented, the unseen power inside her marriage, the shadow behind Charles's distance, and the wound that had never truly closed. For the palace, that name carried years of tension. It could bring back every rumor, every cold silence, every public smile that seemed too heavy to be real. One mention of Camilla could reopen old questions the monarchy wanted buried. What had Diana known? What had Charles hidden? Who had protected whom? And why did the woman loved by the nation feel so alone inside the most famous family in the world? The queen understood this better than anyone. Camilla could not simply be erased from the story, because Charles's loyalty to her had already shaped too many choices. His heart had not followed the clean path expected of a future king. It had pulled the crown into private emotional trouble. And now Diana's note threatened to expose that trouble as something deeper than romance. It made Camilla look, in Diana's eyes, like the quiet force behind the collapse of a royal dream. That was the fear moving through the palace. If the note ever became public, people might not see Camilla as a woman caught in a complicated love story. They might see her as the hidden reason Diana suffered. And once that idea settled into the public mind, it would be almost impossible to remove. Diana's pain had already become powerful. Her sadness had already touched millions. A note in her own words could turn sympathy into anger. So the advice around the Queen became careful. No sudden moves, no strong statements, no reaction that could make the note seem even more real. Advisors knew that denying too much could look guilty, while admitting too much could destroy trust. The palace had to move softly, because every step around Camilla was now covered in Diana's shadow. And the Queen faced a choice with no clean answer. If she rejected Camilla completely, she risked breaking Charles and creating a new family war. But if she accepted Camilla too quickly, she risked making Diana's suffering look ignored, even erased. So the Queen did what the monarchy often does in its most dangerous moments. She did not explode. She rearranged. Quietly, slowly, carefully. Not with a public confession, but with a hidden shift in royal destiny. And at the center of that destiny stood Charles, the future king whose heart had already forced the crown into its most dangerous emotional bargain. I want you to write a detailed script based on the outline I provide for a royal and the British monarchy, using a bold, dramatic, and immersive storytelling approach. The script should be structured according to the provided subheading, ensuring that each section builds upon the previous one without abrupt endings or disconnections. The script must maintain a smooth, continuous narrative flow rather than feeling segmented, and follow the words count length mentioned with each outline. Write in a paragraph format. Please keep hook and transition lines same as in outline section tone and style. The script should have a bold, cinematic, and suspenseful tone to keep the audience engaged. The storytelling should be narrative-driven, focusing on mystery, foreshadowing, and emotional highs and lows. Avoid a dry, biographical format. The script should feel like an investigative and shocking expose. No visual descriptions, scene instructions, or visual storytelling elements. This should be purely narrative. Use a mix of short and long sentences to control pacing and enhance drama. Engagement techniques that must be used. Cliffhangers and foreshadowing must be incorporated to build suspense. Ensure the script remains emotional and immersive, making the audience feel the struggles, triumphs, and betrayals. No standalone endings in any section. Each section should naturally flow into the next subheading without abrupt conclusions. Use bold and dramatic phrasing to emphasize key moments, struggles, and turning points. Highlight the contrast between success and suffering, making the story compelling. Section breakdown and storytelling approach. Each section must maintain a smooth transition, ensuring a continuous flow of storytelling. The narrative should be engaging, avoiding unnecessary factual overload. Avoid listing events mechanically. Each event must be woven into the broader arc of their journey. The script should not reset at each subheading, but carry the momentum forward, ensuring previous and next subheadings remain connected. Language and accessibility. Use simple language that is accessible to a broad audience. Maintain a storytelling approach, so the script should feel like a dramatic retelling rather than an encyclopedia entry. Avoid formal or academic tones, but the language should feel conversational and immersive. Ensure vivid descriptions through strong word choice rather than relying on visual cues or direct scene instructions. Cues or direct scene instructions. Section number 4. Section heading: Charles was forced to face the cost of his choices. This section's content. Word count: my 490 words. Tone and style: bold, tense, confrontational, emotionally immersive. Hook: Charles had spent years believing time would soften the scandal. But Diana's note changed the rules. Suddenly, the past was no longer fading. It was preserved in her own words, waiting like evidence, and the Queen knew her son could not escape what had been written. Key points: show Charles as trapped between personal desire and royal duty, with the note intensifying the pressure around him. Suggest the Queen understood Charles could not become king with unresolved emotional shadows, surrounding Camilla and Diana. Explore the possibility of a private confrontation, where the Queen questions not only Charles's choices, but their consequences. Emphasize that Diana's note forced Charles to face how deeply his private life had wounded the monarchy's public trust. Add emotional tension between mother and son, the Queen's restraint versus Charles's frustration. Present Charles's fear that Diana's words could define him forever if the palace did not control the narrative. Show the Queen refusing to act out of anger, instead choosing a long, calculated path. Build suspense around whether Charles would be punished, protected, or quietly prepared for a future rewritten around Camilla. Transition line, but the Queen's greatest concern was not Charles alone, it was the two boys Diana left behind, and what they might one day learn. Generate a detailed documentary-style script based on the provided outline and subheading. Maintain a bold, dramatic, and engaging storytelling approach with smooth transitions between sections. Avoid word repetition and ensure each section flows naturally into the next. Avoid adding outline headings, just write the script and follow the words count length, given along with each outline above the note, was about Camilla. But its deepest shadow fell over William and Harry. Diana had not only been a princess or a wife, she was their mother. And if her warning was ignored, the Queen feared the boys might one day see the crown as part of the betrayal. That was the part no palace plan could fully control. Charles could be managed. Camilla could be delayed, softened, and carefully introduced. Public words could be chosen with care. But William and Harry were different. They were not symbols on a royal chart. They were Diana's sons. They carried her face in their memories, her voice in their hearts, and her pain in ways no advisor could measure. If the Queen made the wrong choice, the damage would not only be public, it would become personal. Diana's note may have named Camilla, but beneath that name was a deeper fear. Diana seemed afraid that her boys would one day be guided by the same institution that had failed to protect her heart. She had lived inside the rules. She had followed the smiles, the duties, the silence, and the careful words. Yet she still ended up feeling alone. And if William and Harry ever believed that the palace had known the truth, but buried it, then the wound could pass from mother to sons. For the Queen, this created a painful battle inside herself. As monarch, she had to guard the crown. As grandmother, she had to think of two young princes who had already lost too much. She knew William was not only Diana's son, he was also the future of the monarchy. His trust mattered. His belief in the institution mattered. If he grew up thinking the crown had helped silence his mother, then the very future she had protected for so long could begin to crack from within. And Harry was another kind of worry. He carried Diana's memory more openly, more fiercely, more painfully. Where William might learn to hide his hurt behind duty, Harry's grief could burn closer to the surface. The Queen may have understood that a secret like this could change how both brothers saw their family. One might bury the pain, the other might challenge it. But both would feel it. So the Queen faced a choice with no clean answer. If she revealed the note, the boys might be hurt by the truth. They might feel forced to relive their mother's suffering through words she never meant for the world to see. But if she hid it, there was another danger. One day, silence could look like betrayal. One day, protection could feel like control. One day, the boys might ask whether Diana's voice had been locked away to spare them or to spare the palace. That was the cruel weight of the decision. The Queen could protect the children from pain now, but she could not promise that hidden pain would not return later. Diana's warning had become more than a message about Charles and Camilla. It had become a test of loyalty between generations. And so the Queen arrived at the cruelest question of all: should Diana's warning be preserved? destroyed, or locked away where only the crown could reach it. Every monarchy has jewels the public sees, and secrets it never will. Diana's note became one of those hidden treasures not made of diamonds or pearls, but of pain. And somewhere behind locked doors, the truth may have been placed beside the crown's darkest memories. Because in royal life, not everything valuable shines. Some things are valuable because they are dangerous. A crown can be shown to the world. A diamond can be placed under glass. A necklace can be named, guarded, and admired. But a letter like Diana's could not be displayed. It carried a different kind of power. It did not prove wealth. It proved suffering. And suffering, when written by someone the public loved, could become more powerful than any jewel in the royal collection. The Queen had to decide what kind of object this note truly was. Was it evidence? Was it grief? Was it a warning? Or was it something even harder to control Diana's voice, still reaching through the silence? Destroying it may have seemed simple. One private paper gone, one threat removed, one secret buried forever. But to destroy Diana's words would also feel like erasing her. It would mean taking the last private warning of a wounded woman and making it disappear, as if her pain had never mattered. So preservation carried its own strange mercy. Keeping the note meant Diana's truth had not been thrown away. It meant the Queen understood that those words had weight. But keeping it also created a new danger. If the note survived, then so did the risk. One day, someone could find it. One day, someone could speak of it. One day, the palace could be forced to answer why Diana's warning had been hidden, while Charles and Camilla's future was slowly protected. That is why the idea of a royal vault becomes so haunting. Not only a place for jewels, crowns, and ancient treasures, but a place for forbidden papers, private letters, family wounds, and memories too explosive for public life. Diana's note may have belonged among those hidden things. Precious, because it carried her pain. Dangerous, because it could reopen everything. Too powerful to destroy, but too dangerous to release. And who knew about it? That question itself becomes part of the mystery. Was it only the Queen who understood its full meaning? Were trusted private secretaries told enough to guard it? Did senior aides sense the danger without ever seeing the words? In a palace built on silence, even knowledge could be divided. Some people may have known the note existed, others may have known only that something had changed. But the note did not need to be shown to become powerful. It became a silent weapon, not used in public, not quoted in statements, not admitted in open rooms. Yet it may have shaped every careful decision that followed. Camilla's public path could not move too fast. Charles could not be fully freed from Diana's shadow. The family had to act as if time was healing everything, while privately knowing that one hidden paper could make the past return. So the Queen's real decision was never only about one note. It was about the future story of the monarchy. Who would be remembered as loyal? Who would be blamed as cruel? Who would be forgiven? And who would remain trapped behind locked doors with the rest of the crown's forbidden truths? Yet even locked away, Diana's note continued to speak, and its influence began appearing in the careful way Camilla's future was shaped. Camilla did not walk into royal acceptance overnight. Every step around her became cautious, measured, and wrapped in silence. And behind that slow transformation, Diana's note may have been the invisible force reminding the Queen that one wrong move could reopen the wound. The palace could not treat Camilla's future like a simple family matter anymore. It was not just about Charles choosing the woman he loved. It was about a nation still carrying Diana's sadness, two princes growing up under the weight of her memory, and a monarchy trying to look strong while one hidden warning kept pulling it back to the past. Camilla's place had to be handled like a royal operation. Quiet, slow, controlled, the Queen knew that if Camilla was pushed forward too quickly, the public would not see healing. They would see replacement. They would see Diana's pain being brushed aside as if it had only been an uncomfortable chapter the palace wanted to close. And that was exactly what Diana's note made impossible. Her words had turned her suffering into something the Queen could not ignore. Diana was gone from the daily life of the family, but her warning still stood in the way of every easy decision. So Camilla's rise had to be softened. Every appearance had to be timed. Every title had to be weighed. Every public word had to be shaped with care. The palace could not sound too proud, too cold, or too eager. If they praised Camilla too strongly, it might feel like they were asking people to forget Diana. If they kept her hidden forever, Charles would remain trapped between love and duty. The Queen had to walk between both dangers, and neither path was safe. Charles, of course, wanted more than silence. He wanted recognition. He wanted the woman beside him to be accepted, not treated like a problem that needed managing. But the Queen understood what Charles did not always want to face. The public still saw Diana as the wronged woman. They remembered her loneliness. They remembered her grace. They remembered the hurt behind the royal smile. And if Diana's note ever surfaced, all that sympathy could turn back into anger in a single moment. That was why the Queen's decision was so careful. She did not erase Camilla, because doing so would only deepen Charles's resentment and keep the royal wound open in another way. But she also could not allow Diana's pain to look meaningless. Camilla's future had to be built slowly, almost quietly, as if the palace were asking the public to accept her one step at a time rather than all at once. But beneath that calm surface, the bargain remained painful. Charles gained a path forward. Camilla gained a place. The monarchy gained control. Yet Diana's shadow still remained, because the note had changed the emotional rules forever. It had made acceptance possible, but never simple. It had created peace on the outside while leaving questions buried underneath. But royal compromises rarely end a story. They only bury the conflict until the next generation begins asking what was hidden from them. The Queen's decision was not a speech. It was not a confession. It was not a public punishment. It was something colder, quieter, and far more powerful. She chose what the world would know, what the family would carry, and what Diana's sons would inherit in silence. And that was where the true power of the monarchy revealed itself. Not in crowns, not in jewels, not in grand ceremonies, but in control. Control over memory, control over timing, control over who was allowed to speak, and who would be remembered only through carefully chosen stories. Diana's note had forced the Queen to face a truth. No palace wall could soften. The past was not dead. It was waiting. If the note was released, it could tear open the wound all over again. It could turn Diana's private pain into a public trial. Charles would be questioned. Camilla would be judged. The palace would be accused of hiding behind tradition, while a young mother suffered in silence. And William and Harry would be pulled back into the deepest grief of their lives, not as princes but as sons. But if the note stayed hidden, the crown could keep moving. Charles could be protected. Camilla could be slowly accepted. The monarchy could tell the world that time had healed what pain had broken. On the surface, it looked like peace. But underneath, it was something more complicated. It was a bargain. Diana's words would not be destroyed, but they would not be freed either. They would remain locked away, powerful enough to shape decisions, but too dangerous to be spoken aloud. That decision changed everything, because it allowed the royal family to survive without truly answering the question Diana left behind. Was her suffering understood? Or was it only managed? Was her warning respected? Or was it buried because it threatened too much? The Queen may have believed she was protecting everyone, But protection inside the palace often came with a cost. Sometimes it protected the crown more than the people inside it. And so Diana's note became like a forbidden jewel in the royal story. Not worn, not displayed, not named in official speeches, but still there, still shining in the dark, still reminding those who knew of it that the monarchy's greatest treasures were not always diamonds and gold. Sometimes they were secrets. Sometimes they were wounds. Sometimes they were the words of a woman who had lost almost everything, but still wanted the truth to survive. Charles gained his future. Camilla gained her place. The Queen kept control. But Diana's shadow never fully left the room. It followed every careful step, every title, every public smile, every moment where the family tried to move forward without looking back. Because the note had done something no one could undo. It had turned private heartbreak into royal history. And perhaps that is why the story still feels so powerful. Because the most shocking royal secrets are not always the ones shouted from balconies or printed in headlines. They are the ones hidden away, obeyed in silence, and passed down like an invisible inheritance. And that is why Diana's secret note remains so powerful, because even if the palace never spoke it aloud, everything that followed seemed to move around its shadow. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this royal story, make sure to subscribe for more dramatic stories about secrets, power, betrayal, and the hidden side of the British monarchy.